My name is Adam Singolda. I'm the founder and CEO at Taboola. We are in Taboola headquarters in New York, in person, not on Zoom, not from home, not remote, not hybrid, in person. And with me, I have my friend and partner for the past 7 years. Kristen, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Christian Broughton. I'm the managing director of The Independent globally. And this is my first time in New York for 2 years after what seemed like a very long pandemic. And I'm very, very happy to come and see my friend Adam.
We're going to talk about a bunch of things,
Yeah.
You're the chief editor of The Independent. It's such an opportunity for me to learn and talk to someone that comes from the editorial side and speak about the future of journalism and local news and national news and driving growth from the point of view of the editorial team. So it's rare that I get that opportunity. So I'm looking forward to it.
Always.
And I thought the way to kick off this session would be about how you and I met about 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if you remember, but I'm just going to do it.
I remember most of that evening, but there's a couple of reasons why I don't remember all that evening.
You agreed to go to meet me over drinks, which I rarely get to have drinks with chief editors.
Yeah.
And we had a bunch of martinis. And then I told you,
Where was that? Was that Perry Street?
That was Perry Street in the West Village. Yeah, good memory. You see, you do remember.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I told you, there's something you don't know about your business. I said, looking at Taboola's data, we just launched Newsroom, which was basically it was a technology to empower editorial teams to A/B test creatives and things like that, but even more so to see what people on your site, your readers, read when they leave your site on the Taboola network. And I told you, Christian, you don't know this, but your readers love content about family and kids.
Yeah.
You don't cover that.
Yeah.
And your response was, and we just met, mind you, your response was, Adam, with all due respect, The Independent has been around for almost 40 years. Please don't tell me what we should be covering.
Oh, that's such a horrible answer. Did I really say that?
It was
wow. Great. Wow. Okay. Yeah.
And I said...
I've learned to listen sometimes.
And I said, look, let's not fight it out. It's just, but check the data.
Well, it was, from my point of view there, I didn't kind of know a huge amount about you. I didn't know a huge amount about Taboola. We just started working together. I was traveling with some of the commercial guys over here on that trip. And they were like, we've just done this big deal with Taboola. Do you want to come and meet the guy that runs it? I was like, yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. Okay. But what fascinates me is for years and years and years as a journalist, I've sat in rooms in like morning news conference or whatever, and it's just a bunch of people who sit around, small group of people, and they decide what is important that day in the news and what we should do. And it's like top down. There's no insight really. There's just kind of, we all think it's like, it's not science, this is art. And we're kind of gifted in this way that we know exactly what our readers are gonna, even though there are like 100 million of them a month in countries around the world, we still somehow arrogantly think that we have this human instinct that will just answer all the questions. So then I'm meeting this guy and he tells me, you're doing this wrong. I'm like, how do you know? And then I think you got your phone out because you had that great graphic that Newsroom has with all the little bubbles.
Right, the bubbles.
And you're like, well, I know this because this is what people are reading on the internet right now. I was like, okay, yeah, actually this guy, maybe he's got a good point. And then you followed up with your team. Your team came to see me back in London. And they were like, right, here's the data that Adam's talking about. It's like, I think we need to launch a parenting section.
And you did.
And we did, and we launched a parenting, and it worked really well. So thank you for that.
No, I always use this example because it's such and we'll speak about it, but data is actually scary because there's just so much of it. And the biggest challenge, it's almost, data can be a fad unless you know what to do with it. So in fact, activate data into something that can affect your business is the harder part. Capturing the data is not necessarily the hardest part. It's what to do with it?
Well, it's not for you because Taboola's in a really unique position on the open web, I would say. Like, we all know there's a lot written about data in kind of walled garden environments. And each publisher thinks it's really good at data on its site. But what Taboola gives us is what our readers are doing on other sites as well. And there's no way we can know that unless we kind of, tap into Newsroom. So that's why we do it all the time now. So all of our planning now is a heavy, heavy usage of Taboola Newsroom. So that's how we ended up launching that parenting section. But now we've adopted Taboola Newsroom so much across the editorial planning side of things that we're using it to plan some really fundamental and super core news stories that we're doing. They don't come much bigger than, say, Afghanistan. So really serious, heavyweight news stories. And it's expensive stuff for us to cover. So you want to make sure you're staying on that story for absolutely as long as your journalism is powerful. And your journalism is powerful while it's being read and it's connecting with readers. And so every day you measure the engagement in your Afghanistan stories. But what if you just got that day wrong? What if you just weren't very good that day and you just kind of missed it a little bit? Much, much better to measure the engagement across a much broader selection of sites. So what Newsroom enables us to do is to really see that interest of our readers specifically around the internet, just to see if it's ready to, stay on the story or, phase down the story, move on to something else. We do that with all other kinds of things as well. So when we've got elections coming up, are we writing about the specific politicians enough, the ones that our readers really want to research a little bit more, that they really want to look into? So, this gets away from that idea that a bunch of editors in newsrooms just decide what is the story of this election. And it's just a real top-down thing from the editorial team. Well, actually, maybe your readers want to combine other subjects and combine other characters in the election. So when we come to plan something like the midterms, it will start with Taboola Newsroom.
You know what's interesting to me? The biggest shift in listening to you is actually a cultural shift, because it's blending art and science. You have people that for the last 100 years have been working in a certain way, and I think doing God's work, covering the news that people need to know about, so they can, make decisions for their own life. And that's why journalism is important, especially local news a lot of times. How do you bring data to your organization in a way that it's adopted and accepted? How do you measure that? What are the goals, even from where you sit? And then how do you make it not only comfortable and convenient for people to use, but actually something they want to use and look forward to use to drive growth for the business?
Yeah, I think you can get kind of data fatigue, can't you? You can just get too much stuff sometimes. And there are so many competitive platforms out there. They all want to show you their piece of their KPI they think is going to drive your business. I think one of the differences with Newsroom is you actually listened. So it was very rare to meet someone from the commercial world who wasn't talking to me about money. You were talking to me about what readers wanted. And you and actually some other people in your organization did a very good job of listening. So how many years ago was it that you invited me down to Tel Aviv for your sales kickoff?
Probably 4 years ago.
4 years ago. That was a very fun time. But it was also a really, important time for us because Newsroom was just really evolving fast at that point, really being developed. And I had a really good night speaking to the team that you introduced me to who were working on that project. And they said to me, what do you want? What would actually move the needle for you? And some of the actionable insights that came out of Newsroom came out of that conversation in Tel Aviv that night.
That's awesome.
Find me another data platform provider that actually listens and actually iterates their product according to what people wanted. I mean, they might say, yeah, we'll put it on our pathway. And then 6 months later, a year later, it's like, are they ever going to do this thing? Do I really believe they're going to do this thing? Whereas there in Tel Aviv, we were looking at the alerts, like what data signals can actually, trigger actions. So it might be something is really performing well. Hey, this story is really flying. It's not on your homepage. Or it might be, this story is really performing well on your homepage. Have you put this on social? Whatever it may be, just prompting the action. So don't just tell me numbers. There are loads of data platforms out there for newsrooms that will just say, hey, it's 1,368,000, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, okay, fine, whatever. But what do I do with that?
So it came to you versus you had to look at graphs and things, and it made it more actionable, more easy.
So then, and now, especially when we're working in a lockdown environment over the past couple of years and everyone's a dispersed team, you lose that little bit of chat in the office where someone's just saying, hey, can you put that, can you change that headline? Can you put that on the sport page? Can you put that on the homepage? Whatever. And that kind of sense of really active curation, just inevitably, however well you try to replicate the atmosphere of the office and however good the people's home setup is, you're just going to lose a little bit of that communication. But actionable alerts really work.
I know for you, going global, out of the UK was a big priority. How would you say that data and those insights and those technologies kind of helped you evolve and expand globally into all the... we just talked about all the offices you have just in the US, and for you that means traveling to so many places. But we're talking about data almost as an enabler to go global.
Yeah, so The Independent has its kind of core values that will be eternal and unchanging. Globally. And they are the same globally. But when you kind of customize for a certain location, you don't know what kind of sweetens the mix, right? So the kind of hardcore news subjects are self-selecting to a degree, not always, but to a degree. But then you can't just kind of give people news. You've got to find out what they're interested in. And on that cultural level, it's really interesting to look at the newsroom data. So you get, for instance, what TV shows should we cover, right? So we did
in a market.
Yeah, so say US TV shows. We just did this recently. So we were looking for growth opportunities. As you say, we've done an amazing job of growth in the past few years, but we want to get bigger and bigger. So we're now like the #1 quality news publisher in the UK. We're top 10 in the US. So the US is the big opportunity for us there. So it's great. So how can we get bigger there? We've got to kind of, the growth is probably going to be driven from here. Our head of audience globally was in the UK and was planning this out. And we're in a pandemic. So coming for on a little trip, fact-finding over here is not really going to happen. So with Newsroom, we can actually see, some of your readers are reading about these kinds of TV shows a lot on the rest of Taboola network. Or, they're following these sports. And sometimes, you think you know this stuff. You think, we're pretty sure of what we know about our readers. As I was back in that bar in Perry Street, over a martini.
Never forget.
Yep. But it surprises you sometimes. I mean, I had no idea that our readers who are reading like politics and global affairs and stuff, they're also reading loads online about like UFC. Like, really? Like the same people reading your like really serious current affairs stuff or like really into like combat sports and stuff? Like, yeah, they are. So then that presents a challenge back to the Independent saying, well, is it right for the Independent to cover that then? And how should you cover that? So like Love Island TV show, it came up that our readership, I think probably because our readership is just a little younger than a lot of our competitors, they're really into Love Island. So it's like, right, okay. We're all okay. Let's.
To be honest,
let's drop the pretense.
I may not have seen an episode, but please, back to you.
Are you familiar with this show? Yeah. So Love Island, it's there. It's great. Everyone loves it. And it's like it's everyone's guilty secret, isn't it? Come on. But how should the Independent cover that? So actually, we did we went really into it, and we wrote about like the social issues that come out of it and everything. So we kept it very brand and really brought the brand of the Independent to that coverage. But it gave us the confidence to do that. And actually, like, how's that conversation going to go if you can't prove the point? How's the conversation going to go when we had one of the things we did? We got the guy who writes a lot of the kind of op-ed stuff, like a lot of the editorials, like, the most cerebral guy in the room. And we wanted to have a conversation with this guy called Sean. And it was like, Sean, what do you want to write about? And he's great. He's really up for it. He loves it. He loves a bit of innovation. But it's like, Sean, how are you going to cover Love Island? And
how was that conversation?
It's kind of a little bit like, really? And you have to, it helps the conversation if you can say, here's some evidence that we haven't gone crazy.
Our people love it.
Yeah, our people love it. And then you can say, actually, and our people really loved it when you wrote about it, because here's that data too. So yeah, that's important. But hey, I tell you what was a really big challenge was we launched in the pandemic, we launched independentenespañol.com because really interested in overseas expansion to other languages. We're in 6 languages now. And the latest one of those is Spanish. So we're looking at Latin American news cycles and the whole business model there. Because a year ago or so, I kind of changed roles and now very exposed to the business side. And what's the business model of this? How are you going to have a newsroom for Latin America? And obviously the first big resource you've got is you've got a ton of stories in the English language. So actually, which of those subjects are going to be good to like just translate and customize a little bit, and which things do you have to build from like zero? And there's no better way. Let's take the art out then. Let's go for science on that because it's quite a big decision. It's quite a big money decision, and so we use that to just see exactly what the audience wants from our content. And you just remove months of trial and error. And time is money, right? So you're spending loads of money. Bit demoralizing, you're not really getting anywhere. You could do it that way, for sure. That's kind of traditionally, magazines, newspapers are kind of launched on hunch, right? Some of them work, some of them don't. Like, should we take the kind of failure options out of that and just like go straight to success? It's much better.